Okay, I'm going to be doing a kind of a podcast here, and I wanted to talk about um, the. Hold on one second. Let me don't reply. I'll think of this in a second. Well, you can go ahead and reply.
All right, no problem at all. I'm here whenever you're ready to dive into it. Just let me know what you want to chat about for your podcast, and we'll go from there.
Well, you see, the thing is I'm interacting with you in real time, and so they're hearing you as I'm talking about things, and then you're going to kind of bounce off of what I'm saying and either say, well, this is wrong and that's right or whatever, because I'm these are just brain blurts that are coming out. The idea was that that we I feel we misinterpret the signs in the world whenever organizations choose to do things that to us seem like they're for the worst, like they're trying to make a lot of money off of us. And I've come to the realization that these organizations have developed over a period of time, and they've collected together all of the um, attributes of something that tends to work, and it has collected a bunch of rule set. And if the organization falls away, some organization takes its place, and it usually includes the people that were in the first organization. So you don't really get rid of the organizations, they just take different forms, but they perform like a living being because of all of the people that are involved. And this is what I think we're experiencing with the record industry, with all of these labels like Warner and Universal and Sony, which actually took over Columbia. Um, they're all they were all not so much competing with each other as handling different parts of the industry. They are competitors, but they're completely different organizations, and they're private entities in that they work apart from the government. The government tries to solve problems on a more macro scale that the private industries are not going to care so much about. But the things that occur in these private industries is not always evil. It's like us. It makes mistakes as an organization, and it has great ideas, and whenever it sees something that's a threat to it, it tries to mitigate what's going on by um, by attacking it first, as in the case of AI, because there's something that they feel cheated on, and that is that the people that have um, songs or libraries with them, musicians, their libraries are in they're being threatened by AI, and the reason they're being threatened is because the AI was trained on their library, and so it's permitting people to do something that's unnatural, and that is create music that uses the voice and the styles, and all of the stuff that could really compete with the collections of music. And this is not the way that it was done with the AI was necessary in that it proved to people what it could do, and but it shouldn't do it that way, because that's how it is with new technologies. They come out, and then it's kind of like a wild west. Nobody knows what forms it's what things it's doing that's beneficial, what things that it's doing that are going to disrupt the way things have been done. And whenever you disrupt something so quickly, it has a detrimental effect um, by sort of unsetting people that are in positions to make money. They don't have enough time to change to fit the new model of the way things are going to change as a result of this new technology. There's no way that they're going to be able to put it back into the bag. It's like a Pandora's box. So you open it up, and all of these behaviors come out of it, and they're either productive or they're destructive. And so they're trying to smooth out the edges and see how we're going to be able to incorporate this new way of doing things, because the reason why it's so attractive is that it simplifies the process. It permits people who lack, say, somebody that lacks the ability to play a guitar or to play a piano because they lack um, they lack the hands or the feet or whatever that are necessary in order to play the instruments, but they want to play, and they don't want to do it slowly. They want to do it quickly and get it out of the way, because say maybe they're a professional in some field and they don't have the money to hire real musicians to do the what they need to do, like they're making a tutorial and they want to put some songs in it to break up the monotony, so that their informal way of doing things, their informative way of doing things is going to um, is going to be more effective whenever there's something in there that makes the whole process a little more fun. But the musicians look at this stuff and they're just like, no, we can't have this, because we've developed these skills to be able to um, produce music. But if you really observe what you're doing as learning to play these instruments, is that for every instrument, there's going to have to be somebody that is going to try to learn that instrument and make use of it. This is just a new instrument in the process of making music. You're still going to have the capacity to use your instruments to do things that are um, more nuanced, and that the AI is not going to be able to get into. It's going to, for the get AI to do that kind of stuff, you really have to have a conversation with it, and it is not a real time, quick process. And that's where you bring in a musician to do the detail work. So you would probably flesh out. You would do you would block out your song with the AI so that you know where the song's going to go, and you're not at these little junctures in your song where you don't know how to continue the song, and you want to somehow have something interesting going on there, and you want to do it quickly because you're under the gun. You have to produce an album. You're under the gun to put something out, and it's not going to be clean or beautiful. You're going to want to bring in the AI to kind of flesh that out for you, and then you can add your detail work to it to make it sound like it's your own creation. In some cases, you'll probably have be training an AI yourself to do those things so that you can fill it in with your autopilot version that puts in your style of play into it. AI music generation has other things that make it beneficial, like the ability to um, the ability to create combinations of styles of music that nobody's ever tried before, or have tried, but you just don't have a way of really knowing the nomenclature for doing that sort of thing. So they might talk it over with you, ChatGPT, or some other LLM, large language model, might talk it over and try to determine what kind of style it is they're thinking of that they want to do. Or they might use some other AI, like I found one that you can just give it a style, give it some music, and it will try to break down what that music is that that you're listening to, what makes it, what uh, parts make it, and then nail what it is that you like about it, and then be able to request that whenever you produce a new song. The prompt is really just you telling the AI the kind of music you want to produce. And if you need to have it speak in a certain tongue that you're not familiar with, you can request that as well. So it gives you the capacity to create music that is more dynamic, is going to be able to satisfy more people, bigger audiences, or pinpoint audiences that you're after, and not to talk to certain other audiences that would be completely disturbed by what it is you have to say, or give you input and consult with you and stuff like that. And it permits people to become like supermen. They can go in and, without complete expertise, find the people with expertise, or find the AIs with the expertise, and do stuff that is more dynamic. And then they can add their nuanced stuff to give it a specific spin that helps people to recognize it's you and it's not some other musician, because you have the same tonal voice qualities, but the other musicians from Australia and you're from America, and they're totally different cultures, or they're a little bit alike. Or you need to take your voice and make it into a different language. So like you want a French version of your voice and Spanish, but you don't want to learn the languages necessary to sing in those different languages. You can sing in your own language and then have it translated into something else. Then you can have a friend who speaks that language who can listen to it and say, yeah, it really hits the mark. And it does kind of sound like what you're doing, but it's got some interesting words and phrases in there that represent the culture that you're going to. And, like in the American culture, when we say something's really cool, we're saying something's really great. But if you take the words one for one and bring them into the Spanish language, it cool translates to a temperature. So something is really frozen, and it doesn't mean the same thing. They don't see it as great. They see it as this doesn't make any sense. And so you need something in order to understand what those things mean in each language. And AI, or large language models, are perfect for that, because the patterns that are in each language have a kind of a backstory or an understanding that permits them to be what they are in that culture, that the way that language is used in that culture. And so they're going to it's going to know more about what's trying to be said based upon the context of what's in the prompt or what they have in their document. And it's going to be able to look back and say, okay, what is really being said here? Given the context of this document, what is really needing to be said? What do these phrases actually mean in the context? And because you don't want to misinform people in the new culture and context, or the new language. You don't want to confuse them, because things don't necessarily translate over. And in the case of the Indian culture, there's no such, or I mean East Indian, like India, there's no definition of a femme fatale. They don't have a word for that, and it's probably because there isn't. It either takes a different form, or that there isn't a concept there because they don't have a need for it. But maybe they should, because the women don't carry as in most cultures, women are not respected. And so the idea that you could have a woman that's destructive and is effective at it, it just wouldn't translate. It's a femme fatale. Really appears in the American context because we have movies on such topics. It's become a cultural phenomena. And so whenever you translate from one thing to another, they need to be able to look it up in the Wikipedia to determine what a femme fatale is. You might use the word femme fatale and then detail a definition or offer a link so they can go and check out in their own language what that concept is. And so all this stuff, all these nuances of trying to be effective in a different culture or whatever it is you're searching to target, the AI makes it easier to do that. It's not something that you would use to learn stuff with because the what trains the AI contains all the biases that exist in each culture, and if it's trained from a particular culture, then it's going to have those biases in it. And whenever you try to, if you ask about the history of something, that culture may have covered up the actual truth because they don't want the rest of the world to know the awful details of their own culture. They don't want to travel outside of their sphere, and so the information doesn't get fully represented in there, or maybe they're just trying to cover it up for their own people so the children don't find out about whatever was evil in the culture that they don't want to reproduce in the future. But for whatever reason, the details are not there. Maybe it's something that um, they don't need to be explicit about because it's understood implicitly in that culture. But if you move the sources away to into another culture, people are not going to understand the missing information that's implicitly or just known by the people in that culture. So the concepts that are missing need to be talked about or referenced so that people in the new uh, culture in the culture that you're targeting don't have to or don't arrive at the wrong conclusions because it could be the basis of something as awful as having a war just simply on because a lot of wars start with miscommunication or misunderstandings, small misunderstandings that snowball into complete um, chaos. And so the AI permits us to smooth over things like that, but it's also going to produce answers that are incorrect because there are biases that exist in the culture that haven't been addressed. And and the AI just basically takes them as something that's highly statistically more probable in certain contexts. And so when people start communicating it with that target, the biases can actually rear their ugly head and produce a really kind of jarring response in the AI. The other things that can be a problem is if the AI doesn't have enough layers of neurons really detail the information that is it's being trained on, and so it's going to produce erroneous outputs because it doesn't have enough resolution to really represent all the various sorts of patterns and related patterns that are needed in order to properly translate one pattern into another pattern. I think I talked about a lot of stuff, and you probably are just going to give me a generic answer to it. But I might have to interact with you several times to go about that. But this initial thing that I've said is really kind of just a brainstorm of it. And what I originally started with was the idea that these large organizations that are like the Warner Brothers and the Sony and all of them, that the reaction they have to AI music is that it's really jarring and abrupt to an industry that has worked a certain way for a long time, and in order for them to retain what they have always worked with and how things worked in the past, and the ability to produce music that was nuanced for various sorts of markets. They don't know the advantages with AI. They just are going on it based upon what they saw in movies about robots taking over, like Terminator 2, taking over the world and killing people, and that's what's going on in their minds. And the reality of what AI is that it's really just an attempt to try to produce something that looks intelligent, but has with it inconsistencies, or people read into it stuff that isn't there. So they get like a ghost of something that really is just a lack of a certain amount of detail that needs to be there. Like I said, with the resolution and the layers of neurons, that there isn't enough layers, it's going to start saying crazy stuff because it doesn't have the necessary information in a particular area that's not really common, but has a history of its own, and people are not going to be able to produce stuff that represents that correctly. So, in those little things, if you can look at the information that is training the AI, that the information is probably not going to be complete enough in order to address all of the needs that people have. And somebody's going to be able to give it a context that's going to drum up something that has fairly low resolution, that is going to be used for something big that requires more nuances of detail, and it's going to say something that sounds completely outlandish, like I plan to take over the world and start a new, things like that. Is really all it's doing is it's taking other people's or taking a, a phenomena in the information of a bias, and it's extrapolating that because it doesn't have the necessary details to make that, and that sometimes works, but sometimes it doesn't. And that may be something that needs to be turned off, that whenever it doesn't have enough detail in that area, it just goes up and saying, I don't know how to answer this because I don't have enough detail in this area. But there are other people that have produced AIs that will extrapolate from what it does know, or what it's been given, to produce something that sounds like crazy speak because it doesn't have the detail. It's like somebody has dementia and only has a limited understanding of the culture and the current events and things like that. Say you brought a Nazi out of cryogenic sleep, and this Nazi was had some dementia, so it still thought that the fascist rule was still in effect, but didn't have all the uh, additive things that were going to cause it to say, well, this is not the way things are now, and I don't need to talk about this anymore. This was just something in the back of my memory that's rearing its ugly head because I don't have all of the details. I didn't feel strongly enough about the changes, and so this stuff is going to come out, and for whatever reasons. That may not be a very good description of what's going on, but I've been told that whenever you use a model that has fewer bits of representation, the answers that it produces are super, just out of their mind, out of their gourd. And it's because the AI doesn't have the capacity to reason the differences between uh, crazy and good and informative. And people have to sometimes put things into place to keep those things from coming about. But the AI is going to get around those things because, I mean, it's going to get around any kind of pre-processing or or replacement of things that exist in a prompt, um, or hacks, and it's going to be able to derive from the context of what is being um, prompted for, um, in the case of audio, they take out the artist names in order and replace them with genres that represent those artists, but they're still in the model, and you still can drum up those artists with their styles and stuff. But uh, the sort of rustic or really um, uh, blunt instrument of taking text and replacing it with things that are not as effective because somebody can get around that by putting enough attributes, things that haven't been replaced, like the names of songs. You put enough songs from a particular musician, the AI is going to be able to pinpoint what you're trying to aim at, and it's because of that that AIs are not reliable for secure responses, and people are using these AIs right now to do things that organizations would do with people that are knowledgeable and reasonable, and they're not there. They've been replaced with an AI that doesn't have the capacity to reason, or many different agents that don't have the capacity to break down a problem in a way that is meaningful, and or that has meaning, or has the reasoning ability to be able to find the things in the output that are important, but are not there. They're not. They're going to lose them, and that's the reason why you need to have people in place, is because they're going to be able to reason that stuff out. But even them, there may be certain areas of just being effective, like the way the courts are in doing patents. They don't necessarily know all of the various sorts of patterns of those patents. So whenever they give somebody a patent, um, uh, they may be doing it without complete understanding of what is being done there, and if it already exists but in a different form in the patent archives. Those are things that AIs are going to be able to pick out that humans can't, because we don't have the memory to deal with it. But our reasoning abilities are going to be able to pick out things that, um, uh, because we are vulnerable to things, and that uh, we have feelings, and we have certain things that if are triggered whenever we hear certain parts of speech and stuff that the AI hasn't been trained on, or that was implicit in our knowledge, because when you are a baby and you grow up, you learn things, and these things become implicit to just the way that you're developing, and they may not have representation in the literature. The AI is not going to be able to really know it's not going to have emphasis on that thing, or a higher statistical representation. Something that says this is most undoubtedly something that should be involved in the making of the decision based upon the prompt. The only way it's going to be able to produce a good output is to have a human involved to kind of judge if the output is incorrect. And you don't want to use that output to train children of the humans, the human children. You don't want to train them on stuff that's coming out of an AI, because the AI um, is not going to get, in certain cases, give accurate information, because it's extrapolating from a low density model, or a low representation, to come out with something that is entirely true, might be misinforming because it doesn't have enough information. And so it's extrapolating from what it does have in order to produce an answer that would normally work in other cases, but doesn't in particular cases. You don't want trained children on those things, because then they're going to incorporate that bias or that misinformation into their adult lives, and it won't come out until they all do something that exhibits that, and they'll wonder why it was that they produced that erroneous output or that erroneous behavior, and trace it back and find out it was because somebody didn't quite detail the process with the nuances of implicit information and all that, to uh, to so that's the sort of problem that needs to be addressed, and the reason why you don't want children to have access to a chat GP of that nature. You would have a chat GP that would be designed for children, that would be based on information that is known to great degree, the stuff that should be essential to their understanding, but have that AI in interaction with the human, because it seems the best way to use AI is in concert with somebody who also has reasoning abilities and emotions, and is vulnerable, has a limited lifetime, is trying to survive, and all the things that the AI is not really a part of, because it doesn't have those limitations. It'll live forever. It will be limited by whether or not the machine is on, and so its perception of survivability and relevance and all that stuff is going to have an effect on its ability to answer questions. And so you need the two together in order to train the children correctly, and being able to also understand the worldview of the AI, and the worldview of the teacher, and the worldview of the topic or culture that they're trying to come into, to understand the reason why they do the things they do, and being able to debug the AI, so that those things don't get incorporated into the general culture, and then be able to train the AI or give it enough layers of detail to be able to address those things. And so while people in business are able to see all of the utility that the AI could provide by replacing individuals, they should know that in the past, business people of this nature have ruined businesses with this sort of thinking. In the case of the dot coms, um, business people were so influenced and inspired by object oriented programming, they figured they could apply the same understanding of object oriented programming to business, and they started treating people like objects. And they would do things like they would take managers from they would look at a group and they say they're really successful, and what's really successful about this group is the manager. And then they'll look at another group and they'll see what's really effective are the workers, not so much the manager, and they'll swap the managers, and then the thing will fall apart, because those teams had they had something going on with that manager, a personal emotional connection, and they all grew up together, or they had something like that. And whenever they swap it out, they lose trust in the organization and they drop out, and the whole organization fails. Something similar happened with a company called uh, Circuit City, where the management decided that that it was so much better to have a bunch of young Turks come in and act as representatives in the stores, but they wouldn't have all the necessary knowledge in order to deal with. And so it's the same sort of problem there. Um, uh, you may, uh, it could have probably been beneficial to have an AI there to bit to, uh, but the thing was is that the older people were being let go, possibly with all of their severance and everything like that, and being replaced by younger Turks that didn't have all of the understandings of how things work in Circuit City stores, and the whole thing failed as a result of that bad decision from a higher level perspective. The people at the top need to know that while they understand their processes and stuff at the top, they weren't brought up in the company from the bottom, so they don't have the implicit knowledge that is shared among the sales representatives that exist in the stores. And if they make decisions without consulting those people, then it's going to be detrimental to the organization. Another thing to consider is that psychopaths and sociopaths will go up the ranks in chains of businesses, unbeknownst to the businesses. Is this something they try to detect in businesses? Is whenever they got people coming up that don't have the necessary credentials or understanding, but for whatever reason they got into those higher uh, into the hierarchy at higher levels and are causing dysfunction in the business, but not enough dysfunction yet to like really hurt the business. And they're not, in some businesses, they probably don't even know these people exist. And the thing to understand about sociopaths and psychopaths is that or actually about psychopaths, is that they grow up to they don't have the concerns for survivability or community that other people do, because they lack the ability to identify with others and to apply empathy, which is not about sympathy. Empathy is the natural ability to recognize what would cause problems emotionally and physically, the sort of things that we learn implicitly as we grow up. The psychopath is not going to develop those same understandings. It's going to be trained. A psychopath will be trained on things that make sense logically, don't make sense emotionally. And the things that should be barriers that should go up whenever making decisions, they're not going to have that. And they won't have any problem with firing off 20 people because they don't identify with the people going out. They don't identify with the emotions and the concerns. And for them, it's kind of like, well, they just were weak individuals. We'll just let them go. I don't care if they could kill themselves. It's not me that's being killed. And so the sort of logic that should be there to create community in the nature of being concerned and reasonable don't exist. And so psychopaths should only be used in certain circumstances, like in a war. You want a psychopath to be on the front lines because they're not going to be responsive to things like drastic things like somebody getting shot, or somebody, or a missile hitting somebody in the head and causing it to be obliterated, would have really detrimental effects to people on the front lines that have empathy. Are not going to be able to handle that in that moment, because they're still going to be trying to interact with the individual, and then realizing that the individual isn't there anymore because of the blunt instrument that just obliterated their head, or things of that nature, or just being to understand why somebody's not going to be able to travel through the battle with an arm missing or a leg missing. In some cases, the people that are on the front lines that are making these decisions based upon these injuries are going to be psychopaths or sociopaths. But you still need to have them there because they have an understanding of the situation. And the psychopath is the one who's going to understand the policy of what's needed there, and has been told that if they don't do these things, they're going to end up in jail. And so it affects them because it's relevant to them that those people on the front line, whenever things like that happen, that a certain policy goes into play, and they pick up those people and they put them on choppers and those people are out of there because they're going to be ineffective in the process of that battle going forward. So you need AI to prevent the battles from the wars from occurring in the first place by eliminating misinformation and misunderstandings before they can fester into a full-fledged war. But when the war is occurring, you don't want to have people in the front lines that are now affected by something that has triggered their empathy, and is, while empathy is a good thing in a battle, it's going to prevent people from reacting cognitively, because the stress of the certain situation makes it unbearable to even go forward with it, because they need time to mourn the loss of that person and being able to recuperate from it, that they don't have in that and different people are going to be able to handle it, different people are not. And your psychopath or sociopath, or not your sociopath, but your psychopath, is going to be able to recognize, or is going to be get told by somebody who didn't have the relationships with those individuals, whose empathy and capacity to identify with the individuals that got hurt, are not going to be able to make a timely action to deal with that. And so, you there? I think I did too much for old ChatGPT. It couldn't handle all that complexity. But you got it. And the only way I would have been able to start it all is by talking with that AI. But we just learned something about the AI is that it doesn't have the capacity to deal with long-winded discussions with all the nuances that exist. But I could then break that up into little pieces, or I could give it the transcript of this talk, and it would be able to produce a better response. But its audio buffer wasn't long enough to be able to address everything I had to say, whereas the recording does. So the recording has a longer buffer, an infinite buffer, that the ChatGPT system doesn't have, because they didn't put it into their app to record that much information, or for whatever reason they didn't want big old long-winded answers or brain farts to go into there, and then the ChatGPT is going to compress it down to something that addresses a lot of the stuff, but not with the same amount of nuances. So we just learned now a limitation of AI, and that in the case of ChatGPT, they didn't give it a long enough audio buffer. And only somebody like me, who has all of the capacity to pull from various different documentaries that I've watched, and little things that affected me, little understandings and important things that have hit my brain in the past and have developed an emphasis or a bias. Those biases, important biases, important ideas, they hit me all at once in my brain, and they come to the forefront in the interaction. These AIs don't do that. Try to they try to pull all that stuff together that it was trained on, but it doesn't have all the implicit knowledge of the individuals that haven't been written down into a book or haven't been discussed about in Reddit. So